All right, so welcome. Today's topic is digital audio theory, and this is going to be a series of videos. I don't think I'll be able to fit all the topics of digital audio theory into one video, but hopefully by breaking it down, it'll make it easier for you guys as well. So first, let's talk about digital audio. What is it? How is it different than analog audio? Well, if we think about the real world, we think about the analog, the real world, as being continuous and very smooth, right? Air molecules or whatever sound is traveling through, right, move continuously, right? They'll push out and they'll push back very, very smoothly. In the world of digital audio, right, digital actually means digits. Everything is actually going to be quantized and actually numerified, right? So everything is going to be a number. And to illustrate this concept very quickly, I just have this little guitar recording here. Take a listen and so it's a nice little guitar ditty, and from a distance it looks like with this very nice smooth waveform, right, where we can see the air molecule pushing out and pulling back and pushing out and pulling back, and that's actually trying to do what or at least emulate what our audio speaker is doing, right? The speaker cone is pushing out, and then it goes up a little more, and it pulls back, and then it pulls out, and then it pulls back, right, very continuously. But if we keep zooming in here, right, we zoom in so far to the point where we actually see that it's not continuous. We get all these little jagged squares inside the computer as far as the computer is concerned. And again, this has to do with the fact that the computer is thinking in discrete numbers rather than continuous lines. It's not like the computer can take a pen and just draw this perfect line out like you can on a piece of paper. Rather, it has to think in pixels or dots or whatever medium you're working in. It has to come up with a number. In the case of an audio file, it's this digital audio file format. So I'm going to show you how this works. I'm first going to demonstrate this on my little bamboo paper here we got. And I'm going to just take my pen over here and just draw a very simple sine-ish kind of looking sound wave. So just something just like this. Hey, let's change the color while we're at it. We'll draw our 0 axis here where effectively there's silence. Man, I cannot draw a straight line, but that's all part of the appeal of this, I guess. All right, so we have the sound wave, right? You see the sound pressure comes up and comes back, and it's all very nice and smooth. Well, a computer can't do that, right? Instead, what the computer has to do is take measurements. And so the first lesson of digital audio theory is when we're digitizing a sound, every so often we have to take a measurement. And this actually has a name. It's called the sample rate, often abbreviated SR. You'll see that pretty frequently. When you're working inside a DAW or other applications, you'll see sample rate or SR. Anything that's digital will have to run at a sample rate, essentially. So I just drew these little pink dots, and these little pink dots are essentially going to represent the places where we're going to take a measurement. So I'm just going to take this dot, and let's say the sound wave is somewhere down here. Oh, let's keep it pink. Sorry. Hey, go away. All right, so I've got this measurement here. This dot's right there. I'm going to go up here. This is where the line, hey, don't click. Oh, why aren't you working today? Okay, dot up here. So just matching the dot with the point on the sound that it corresponds to. All right, so somewhere down here, and I'm just trying to eyeball this. So I have all these dots, right? I just took all these measurements, right? At this point, the computer said, hey, the sound's somewhere down here. Somewhere it's up here, somewhere it's up here, somewhere it's up here. And then what the computer does is it actually will take these dots and it'll store them into memory or hard drive or wherever it's doing it, and it will never ever remember this blue line again. So I'm going to erase most of this blue line if I can, right? Because that's the analog signal. That's the part the computer is not measuring. It's only taking measurements on the pink dots, right, on the sample rate. So here, let's do that. And then what we're left with is just all these series of dots, right? This single measurements. And in Cubase, at least, it renders these as a straight squared off edges, right? So something, oh, I did it again. I have to stop clicking that. I'm not even sure how I'm clicking it. And it's remembering all these dots essentially as these lines. And so we make all these lines. And Cubase will actually connect them like this. And I think most DAWs do that now. Though there are other ways to, I did it again, to not do that. And after we connect all the dots, we have something that looks like this, right? So now we can see this pink measured version. We have all these different measured points, right? All these lines now represent a single measurement of that sound wave, right? We essentially took that very smooth thing, we took points, we recorded those points, and now this is what's left over. This is essentially all that's left of our sound, just a series of these lines. And will it sound like our original sound? Well, that's going to depend on several things. But you can definitely see that it doesn't quite resemble our original recording, right? Our original recording was nice and smooth, and we can sort of draw it back in here. We can try to re-emulate it. See how it's a nice smooth line, and our pink line is no longer that, right? Instead, our pink line is now jagged and rocky, and something is different about it. Something has changed. Whether or not we can hear this difference is really going to depend on how often we're taking these samples. So, right, to illustrate this point, I'm going to go over here. So we'll draw another line. Let's use another, I like the blue today. We'll try to draw another same sine wave, something like that. And let's say we're not sampling it as frequently, right? So you can see this jagged staircase looks vaguely resembling the original sound wave. Well, what if I only take a dot here, 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 and here? So my dots, my measurements, have a lot, there's a lot fewer of them. They're more spaced out. In other words, I have a lower sample rate, right? If I have a lower sample rate, this is exactly what's going on. So I'm going to put a dot there, put a dot there. There's already a dot there. There's already a dot there. There's already a dot there. As you said, now once we take the measurements, the computer no longer remembers the original. So I'm going to erase that recording, or just erase the sound. I guess it wasn't actually really recorded because only the pink dots were recorded. And now we play a little connect the dots. All right, so there's my line until we get to there, and then until we get to there, until we get to there, until we get to there. And if we want to make it nice, look like it does inside the computer, we can just connect these points, though that's inconsequential. How does this shape, right, compare to our original sound? Well, that looks a lot less like our original in this case. I think we can all agree that this nice smooth waveform was completely destroyed into this realm of squares, right? We don't see that anymore. Instead, we just see these big giant blocks. So we're going to have a lot of distortion in this case. And that distortion is actually going to appear as extra frequencies, which most people don't realize. Whenever you have distortion, it's not that you're necessarily just losing information. It's also that you're actually introducing new information into the signal. New frequencies will be present in this that wouldn't otherwise be. So sample rate matters. And as audio engineers, we actually have a really quick and dirty shorthand for knowing how high of a sample rate do we need. And the short answer is this nice, really compact, I'll give you, it's going to be an equation, right? It's going to be a little bit of math, but it's a really nice little compact equation called the Nyquist Theorem. It's Nyquist Theorem, all right? And the Nyquist Theorem says this: if you want to measure a sound, right, you want to digitize it. In other words, all you need to do is make sure your sample rate has twice as many samples as whatever frequency, or the highest frequency you want in your recording to be. So in other words, if I'm making a recording for humans, which I most of the time am, humans can normally hear for about 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So I just need to take the higher number of that, 20,000, multiply it by 2, and that's how we get our sample rate. And for those of you who know anything about digital audio formats or have looked inside your DAW, you might see that a very, very common sample rate to start out with is about 44,000 hertz. Why is it 44,000 hertz? Well, this is a little bit more than 2 times the highest sound that most of us can hear, right? 20,000 hertz about the highest, multiply it by 2, so therefore we need a sample rate about 44,000 hertz. If you are making a recording for dolphins and dolphin sonar or bat sonar, or even just dogs, right? Dogs can hear pretty high frequencies too. This might not be a high enough sample rate. You might need a higher sample rate. There are some other nice advantages of working with a really high sample rate, but we're really not going to address them in this video. And in fact, if you're just starting out engineering and mixing, you're actually going to do yourself a favor if you don't worry about them, because you're just going to eat up a lot more system resources more quickly if you're recording everything at these ultra high sample rates now. Like a pretty professional sample rate is now 192 kilohertz. So that's more than 4 times this 44,000 hertz. This is way too high for beginning audio engineers. It's just going to kill your hard drive all that much more quickly if you're working with larger projects. So in general, right, we have this thing called Nyquist Theorem. How many measurements do we need to take? Well, whatever frequency we want to hear, we need to have at least twice as many as that. So here, let's do a little a practice problem. Let's say you actually have a sample rate. Let's go backwards. So you have a sample rate that's equal to, let's just say, 10,000. So if my sample rate's 10,000 hertz, what's the highest frequency that I can have in my recording? Well, we take 10,000, right, and we just divide it by 2, right? We go backwards. So in other words, to find the Nyquist frequency, right, the frequency which is equal to the highest frequency we can hear in the recording, just take your sample rate and divide by 2. And that'll tell us that the highest frequency we can hear in a sample rate recording of 10,000 hertz is only 5,000 hertz. All right, so that might be a little bit confusing. But I think we will try to demo this in a moment here. Give me a second. All right, so we're coming back to this original guitar recording, and if you recall, just get the sound in your head. What I really want to do is actually change the resample rate and the playback speed so we could actually hear this truly being played back at a different sample rate. But I also just realized I don't think my system will let me do that while I'm recording video off the screen, because that's recording audio too. So I kind of created a little simulation here using Cubase's resample function. Basically, by resampling it to a much smaller number of samples and then enlarging again, I can sort of recreate the effect of basically reducing the number of samples in this recording. It's not going to quite sound exactly the same, but it's pretty close to what it'll sound like if we sampled this instead of at 40,000 hertz, if we sampled it more like around 10 to 20,000 hertz. Here's what the result will sound like. And that's a pretty big difference, right? If you recall, let me go back here. Here's the original. If I do not have a high enough sample rate because of that Nyquist frequency, I'm missing all of my really high frequencies. I'm missing a lot of definition. Everything sounds much more hazy, much more junky, much more a lot less clear. All right, so that's the after, and then this is the before. So there you have it. There's some of the weird things about sample rates. If you don't have a high enough one, you're just going to lose all your high frequency content. However, that content doesn't usually just go away. It actually goes someplace different. And those frequencies actually become aliased. You guys might know that term. Usually when a frequency becomes a frequency it's not supposed to be, we say it's aliasing. It's a fairly common phenomenon in the world of digital audio, though it was probably a lot more important, a few years ago when sample rates weren't quite as high. But regardless, the idea of aliasing in the terms of working with sample rates is more commonly known as a problem called fold-over. And I can use, I have a Absinthe program down here loaded up. I can use Absinthe. There's my keyboards on. Let's load up Absinthe to show you fold over. So right now I've got Absinthe loaded. This is going to synthesize a single sine wave, although I actually programmed it to be 50 times, you can see that one sine wave, 50 times whatever value I put into it. All right, so I'm going to turn this down before I hurt someone's eardrums here. Because this will be very obnoxious. So anyway, I'm going to, let's put it down like around 26 or so. And if you have a low system, you should be able to hear this is 1 times 50, which is 50 hertz. And you should hear this very, very low rumble, very, very quiet. Again, I'm turning it way down because when I go to higher frequencies, this can really hurt your ears if you're listening to it too loudly. And I'm going to slowly dial this up. And we should be able to hear this tone coming up. And again, please monitor your volume. Let me go up a little faster. So right there, I have about 20 times 50. So about 1,000 hertz. Right, I'm just playing 1,000 hertz. And again, keep in mind, right, we have a sample rate of 44,000, Nyquist frequency of 22,000. So there's something going to be strange that's going to happen when we get to that level. Keep going up. So right now I have 100 times 50, or 5,000. So that's 5,000 hertz. Keep going up. I've got about 10,000 hertz, right? 50 times 200. Keep going up, and up, and up, and up. And once we get up to around 400 times 50, that's 20,000. And our system is making sound. You can see our output is emitting stuff. I'd be very surprised if any of you can hear this. Maybe there is a little bit of an artifact in there, so there is a little bit of a presence, but myself, I can't hear anything coming out of my system right now. So basically, we made the frequency so high we couldn't hear it, right? Well, let's keep going. I'm going to keep dragging this upward, right? So if I go all the way up to 500, we're at 25,000 hertz. And here's the strange thing. Starting around here, you might say, hey, well, we're never going to hear it again, right? We went past 20,000 hertz. That's as high as we can hear. But the system only lets me go up to about, 22,000 hertz. And something, once we go beyond that, the system is still outputting information. It's still making sound. But the system can't actually store anything higher than 22,000 hertz. So that sound has to go somewhere. So I'm going to keep going higher and higher and higher. And eventually, I've been hearing it now for a little while, but you probably can start hearing this again on your own system. I'm going to keep going higher and higher. And you hear this very, very high tone that's coming down as I go higher. And again, this is fold over. I am simulating fold over right before your very ears. So check this out. I've got 700, right, times 50. It's 35,000 hertz. I've actually exceeded my 22,000 hertz limit by about 13,000 hertz. And basically, in order to find out what you're actually going to get out of your system, you just have to subtract them. So my 22,000 hertz limit is exceeded by about 13,000 hertz, right? So that means my system's actually only going to allow me to go about 13,000 hertz below 22,000 hertz. So this is actually going to come out like closer to around 9,000 hertz. If I keep going up, we'll keep coming down. There you go. I'm sure everyone can hear that. Until we get to a point, right about, let's see if I can find it. That should be a very low tone. Right about in there, where I've actually folded over twice. I've gone so far down, I've actually gone back down to 0. Let me show you how some of this math works here. If you guys heard that, that was fold over. Oops. Let's make this a little bigger. Let's go to a new page. Grab our pen. All right, so think about this fold over, this sample rate speed limit, right? SR divided by 2 equals Nyquist. Right? Think about this as a really, this is a speed limit, essentially, right? You're driving on the highway, and this gives you the speed limit. Whatever the sample rate is, you can go up to half of that speed. And then this Nyquist theorem, right? This thing says, that we're going to produce fold over, right? Fold over is like the really most mean traffic cop in the entire world. He's so incredibly mean because for every, mile per hour, kilometer per hour you go over the speed limit here, you're going to be forced to do that much below the speed limit from now on, right? So if the speed limit is 50 and you're caught doing, 60 in a 50 zone, that magical fold over traffic cop is going to take your car and put a magical device on it. From now on, instead of going 10 over the speed limit, you're only allowed to go 10 under the speed limit, so that your new speed limit from now on is 40. Right. Similarly, so if we had a sample rate of 40,000 divided by 2, we'd have a speed limit of 20,000 hertz. If we were trying to render, we'll say 24,000 hertz, right, in a 22 zone, right, or sorry, a 20 zone, I think is what I said. There we go. We'd be going 4,000 over the speed limit. So from now on, we're actually only going to do 4,000 below the speed limit. So we can only do 16,000 hertz from now on. And this is fold over, right? And this corresponds. The faster you go over the speed limit, the lower you're going to go. All the way down to 0, in fact. And actually, you'll fold over again around 0. It's kind of freaky. But we just saw it sort of at the end of that little absinthe experiment. All right, so again, here are the key concepts for our first introduction video to sample digital audio theory. Audio, we need to take a series of measurements are. The rate at which we take these measurements is called the sample rate. One of the most common sample rates is 44,000. It's actually 44.1 for being specific, kilohertz. So this is the sample rate you'll find on audio CDs, for instance. It's a good default sample rate. The reason why this is a good default sample rate is because your ear, right, humans, let me draw a little human here. Here's my head, my neck, and my body. I just haven't really drawn anything yet today, so we might as well get this started. So there's my human, right? Really can't hear much above 20,000 hertz. That's a pretty safe limit for even some of the people with the best ears. So as long as this, right, we have that Nyquist theorem, which says the sample rate divided by 2 is as high as we can hear, or higher as we can record in our recording, I should say, in our digital audio system. We're safe, right? So 44,000 hertz divided by 2 is 22,000 hertz. That's happier and higher than the human, right? So you can be very happy and know that you can hear all the frequencies that are in your recording as long as it's 44,000 hertz. If we exceed that limit, right, we had to bypass some safeguards essentially in order to do it. But if we exceed that limit, what's going to happen is fold over, right? And for every frequency we go over, we're going to go actually under the speed limit from that point on. Okay, in the next video, we're going to take a little detour before we get into bit depth and talk about other things like dither. But stay tuned so you get the full, complete idea of what goes into a digital audio system as far as audio is concerned. This is only one half of the story.